This is a scary story from a Reddit user. I was alone in my apartment. The power went out, and then the screaming started. It was about 9 p.m. I was home alone. My boyfriend had gone to visit his parents for the weekend, and I was working from home. So I'd been on the computer all day and was just starting to relax when the power went out. It wasn't unusual for the power to go out where I lived, so I wasn't too worried. And because it was summertime, I have a portable AC unit that I could plug in and cool my little apartment. I got up to get something to drink, and while I was in the kitchen, I heard what sounded like a woman screaming in the next apartment over. It sounded like she was running away, maybe tripping over things, knocking stuff over. Drawers opening and closing, muffled screams. I couldn't make out any of the words that she was saying, but it definitely sounded like she was being chased by something or someone. It was so loud that even with the windows open, I could hear everything clearly. It was almost like being inside somebody else's nightmare. I stood there, listening intently to try to figure out if I should call the police. Then the sound stopped suddenly, and I didn't hear anything for about 10 minutes. The only sound was the buzzing of the fly that had gotten trapped inside my apartment when the power went out. Then I started hearing these heavy footsteps coming closer to my apartment door. I don't remember exactly what made me do it. Maybe it was an instinct or a fight or flight response. But I don't know why I decided to turn off all of the lights in the apartment instead of keeping one on. I turned off the big light in the front room, and the light above my kitchen sink, and the light in the bedroom. And then I moved to the back of the apartment near my office and waited. I honestly don't know how long I stood there waiting. It felt like hours, but it must have only been a few minutes, because eventually I started to get really scared. The sound of the fly buzzing around in the dark seemed way louder than it should have been. I started to think maybe I should have called the police, or at least called my boyfriend. But what would I have said? There's a woman screaming bloody murder in the next apartment. And when I opened the door to check, I saw some crazy things. And then I heard footsteps chasing after her. That probably wouldn't have gone over well. So I kept waiting, hoping that whatever was going on would be over soon. And then I heard the sound again. Those heavy footsteps. They were right outside my door now. And because I couldn't see anything in the pitch black room, I started to imagine things. Was it a guy? Was it a group of guys? Were they armed? Were they after me now? What if they were after me all along? I tried to tell myself to calm down, but I couldn't. The footsteps stopped, and I heard a click that sounded exactly like somebody turning the doorknob. My heart started pounding in my chest, and I could feel my breathing getting faster. I don't know what I was expecting to happen, but it wasn't this. The doorknob turned slowly, and the door opened just enough for me to see a crack of light under the door. Then a hand reached under the door and turned the light switch on in the hallway. And standing there in the doorway was a man. He was maybe in his mid-30s, and he looked a bit disheveled, like his hair was a mess and his clothes weren't clean. But what really caught my attention was his eyes. His eyes were huge and wild-looking, like a deer in the headlights, and his face was pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He took a step into my apartment, and he looked around frantically, like he was searching for something or someone. Then he looked back at me, and in the brief moment before I could turn away, I saw that he had no pupils. His eyes were completely black. I screamed, and he flinched back as if he hadn't expected me to be there. Quickly apologized, stammered something about needing to use my phone, and asked if I could let him come in. In retrospect, I should have known not to let him in, but I was still in shock from seeing his eyes, and I was also scared that he might hurt me if I didn't let him in. I guess I thought that whatever he was looking for, he was probably looking for it in my apartment. So if I let him come in, maybe he wouldn't hurt me. He stepped into the apartment and closed the door behind him. I watched him as he did this weird little dance of trying to look normal, while also looking around wildly. He ran a hand through his messy hair, and he sighed really loudly, like letting all the air out of a balloon. Then he looked at me again and asked if I could help him. In a panic, I shook my head and backed away. He looked at me for a moment, and then he took off running, crashing through my door and down the hallway. I slammed my door shut and locked it as fast as I could. I leaned against the door and slid down to the floor, trying to catch my breath. I tried calling 911, but it was too busy and I couldn't get through. I called my boyfriend and left him a message explaining what had happened. I told him I was scared and to please call me back as soon as he got the message, and then I waited. It was the longest 5 minutes of my life. I kept thinking that I was going to die and that whoever or whatever was out there was going to break down my door and kill me. I could hear shouting and banging on doors and heavy footsteps in the hallway. Every time I heard a noise, I jumped and screamed. Finally, my phone rang, and it was my boyfriend. He sounded really pissed off, and he told me that I was being ridiculous. Why would I think that there was a crazed killer loose in the apartment complex? And then he started making fun of me for thinking that I'd seen a ghost. I told him that I had, and he just hung up on me. And a few minutes later, the power came back on, and I went to check on my neighbor. When I opened her door, she was sitting there on the floor crying. She explained that her husband had run out of the house after having a really bad nightmare. Apparently, he runs out of their apartment in the middle of the night, sometimes when he has nightmares, and she always goes after him to make sure he's okay. But tonight, she said, he looked different. She said he looked like he'd lost his soul. After we talked for a minute, I went back to my apartment, and I haven't seen that man since. I don't know if he lives here or if he's dead or what. I don't even want to find out. And my boyfriend doesn't believe me, but that's okay, because I never want to see those eyes again. That was a scary story from a Reddit user. And if you like this, then check out more creepy stories like these. But that is all I have for you today. So thanks for watching, and bye.